Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at a game called Top Gun Strategy Game for 2 to 4 players. Top Gun, the strategy game, is a rich thematic game based on the Top Gun license, or is it? Anyway, it's done by Prospero Hall, who's done games like Horrified and I believe Bob Ross. It's a two-part game. So on the one hand, you've got volleyball. On the other side, you've got an actual tactical combat over the assumedly salty desert lands of Miramax area. So keeps the cold side cold and the hot side hot. Anyway, let's take a look and see what Top Gun is all about. Okay, let's take a look at what is in Top Gun. First off, you have two modes to the game, and I have set them side by side. First, it's volleyball time. That's right, Top Gun starts with a volleyball time. What you're going to do with this, we will determine later when we go through the gameplay, but suffice to say that there's the blue team and the pink team. Go Top Gun Pinkers, go Top Gun Bluers. Then you funnel off into the second part of gameplay, which is the actual tactical battle between you and your opponent here in the training grounds, the mountainous terrain, etc. Each player has its own shields to hide the moves they're going to make. They have a set of tiles that they'll use to maneuver their planes. They have a plane which has 4 different degrees of elevation, and they have some WSO cards for their co-pilot, so to speak. Instruction rule set of dice to determine if you hit something or not. These are extra bonuses, so you'll learn about those once you play the volleyball game. And then you have 3 double-sided situations, so that when you start this second phase of the game on that map, this will tell you exactly how to configure the game for starting between the attacker and the defender. With that, let's do a quick round of some gameplay. Okay, step 1, how you play the volleyball game. This one is interesting. We're going to zoom out a little bit. So, here's the ball. Call the ball, Mav. Alright, whoever starts gets to decide where this ball lobs over. Typical volleyball. If you are on the receiving side, if you go second, you have this one opportunity as a bump save. What that means is that if you would have to reveal a card and you don't want to because it could be bad, then you can use this one time in the entire game thing to go, oh, never mind, this is a free bump. Bump and save. Bump save. So what do you do? Well, here's how it goes. First off, you start off and say, I'm going to go here. Volleyball lobs over here. It is required on this player to flip over the card, and it may have several things. A bump, a set, spike, or a whiff. You're trying to find your opponent's whiff cards. So right now it's bump. This says I can go 1 or 2 in any direction orthogonally. Now why would you want to? Well, if you want to bump 2, you knock it back over to your opponents. That seems logical, but since you know what your cards are when you place them down, and you are able to look at the cards again, you can go, hey, if I bump here, I can do a spike or set and move over there. It's just a way to sort of organize. But right now, I'm just going to bump 2 over here. Waha! Now, it's up to this player to reveal that it is a whiff. Dun dun dun. The pink team draws a pilot tile. So, this is an extra tile that I'm going to get during the second phase. It's going to aid and assist me. Alright, now, starts again. Well, let's go here and have you explore that. Well, that's, oh, lucky move, whiff. So now the blue team gets to draw 1 green WSO card, which will be helpful to them in a different way. Now we start over again and go, I'm going to go over here. There you go. Just like volleyball. Spike. Spike means I can send it anywhere I want over here, and I'm going to send it here. Boom, I like it. Whiff. Blue team gets 1 green pilot tile. There you go. Now we go back and forth. There. Whoosh. Start here. Whiff. Look at that. I seem to know where all the whiff cards are without really knowing it. I swear I'm not doing it on purpose. Alright. And finally, so now we've got 2 whiffs. And One of those is going to be eventually make one of these teams lose. Set. Nice. So I'm going to bump it here to here, because I think this will be a spike. Oh, gee, how did that happen? Set, just like volleyball. Set, spike, doomba. And, do you get it? Nope, set. No. So set can move one over, but it has to go over to a, oh, that's an interesting one. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to flip this over. Bump means I can go up to 2 in any direction. 1, 2, 1. I'm going to do here, and I'm going to flip it over, and it is a spike. Look at that. How'd that work out? This is all random too. I didn't actually stage this. So set, bump, spike. Booyah. Here we go. What's this going to be? Set, move over 1, bump. Okay, so bump. Bump lets me go 1 or 2, which is perfect because it gets to the spike. Shazam! Boom! Onto you! Get back here, Mav! Yep. Anyway, bump means I can bump it 1, 2, 1 back. I'm going to bump it over here. I'm going to bump it right over. Do I want to reveal that? Oh, now I could have used my bump save, but for example, I'm not. Darn it, look at that. So now the blue team gets to draw a green pilot tile and a WSO card. And they have won, which means they also get the advantage of being able to decide whether they're going to attack or defend in the next scenario. So right now, here we're at. So pink side is going to start off with 1 extra tile and 1 WSO card, which are extra more beneficial than the ones that each team comes with by default. And look at that, 2 tiles and 2 WSO cards. So there's just definite advantage for the attacker, or for the winner of the volleyball game, in the next phase of the game. And that, we're going to move right over here. We're going to set that aside, and this is going to be the second phase of the game. Now, normally these are going to be hidden behind a screen. I'm going to keep them face up towards me so that I can kind of demonstrate a little bit about what happens here. These and these are no longer necessary. We don't need those because, at least for now, oh, sorry, you go here. So then, the blue team gets their 2 special tiles, their WSO cards, and all of the benefits of these. So that's actually pretty cool. And, you know, not to be left out, our pink team, they're going to get the same thing. They've got their little plane and everything like that. And then we're going to go ahead and plan out the next phase of this game. So, first thing we do is we decide who the winner gets to decide to be, the attacker or the defender. We're going to have, they want to be the attacker. That means that all I have to do to win is to achieve a lock-on, a target lock. If I achieve a target lock, I get 5 points, 12 points, and I win. The defender has it differently. There's going to be some objectives for them to fly around. So they can also achieve a target lock if they wish. That's one way to do it. Or they can collect 3 waypoint tokens, which gives them 2 points apiece. So there is a chance of getting more than 5 points as a defender, but it's generally going to be trickier, particularly since you're kind of almost always at a disadvantage. The way we do it now is we look and go, okay, where do these go? So this kind of tells us where everyone goes. As the defender, I'm going to be placed right here, facing this way, at elevation 2. See that I'm at 2? So there we go. I'm right there. I'm also going to have tokens placed right next to, so there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, and there's one there. For the attacker is going to be at elevation 3, so we're going to go ahead and put them up, pardon my shaky cam. I'm going to put it up to level 3, and it's going to start right there in that direction. Direction is very important in this second game. So as you can see, we've matched everything up, and now we're ready to go. Now how does a turn play off like this? Well, each player is going to take 2 tiles, and these tiles differ. They have different maneuvers that are capable. And you'll notice that generally speaking, the green ones oftentimes can give you a little more advanced maneuvers that sort of help you get out of a tight spot. But you'll notice these here, and WSO cards. These are cards that tell you when you are close enough or in range to attack, or in range to be able to counter-attack, counter-defend. So this is all at my disposal to be able to choose what I'm going to do this turn for pink. So how I would do it is, you'll notice these tiles, they give you the start location, which you'll orient towards wherever the plane is at. And then you will have the end location. Now what's interesting is that more aggressive maneuvers like this are going to lower your altitude. The lower the altitude, the more likely that your opponent is going to be higher up in the air and get an extra die. That's really the advantage of altitude in this case. So for example, if I were to do this, and I mean, I wouldn't do this in real life, but so you can kind of see that this is where it starts, and where it would end would be actually here would be ending opposite, which we wouldn't want, because if we go off the map, that's an instant loss. So instead, say we were to go here, and the great thing about the two pieces is you can kind of stack them on top of each other and kind of know in the end where you're going to wind up being. So let's do this. We're going to do this as the defender, or are we? Yeah, we're going to do this. We'll move up. And yeah, so that's, or we could just keep going straight. Let's do that. That's not the wisest thing. So we're going to do that. And then to pick which card we want to use, we can choose any number of these configurations depending on where we think our enemy is going to be. And in this case, I'm just going to use my green one. Now these tiles you can reuse every turn. You don't have to limit yourself, but the cards you do use until you play this card to retrieve them all back. So your options in that regard are limited. So we're going to do that. At the same time, I'm going to be very tricky, and I'm just going to use both of these however I want. And I'm just going to grab a WSO card just as an example, because this isn't that particularly astounding. But you flip them over. Let's pretend that there was some really smart intelligence here. Wow, that's nice. Wow. So you start here. Oh, I like that. Let's do that. That could be advantageous. These happen simultaneously. And so now that we're going to do that, the blue is going to do this. It's going to take its first tile and it's going to go start here, or start here, and end here. So we've done a flip-flop, but we've had to reduce our altitude down to nothing. So we're going to go ahead and reduce that. Sorry. This is one cumbersome thing. Before I even get to the reviews, this is pretty cumbersome. So we started here, we ended here. Okay, so that was our first one. Our second one, or wait, yeah, our second one would be to start there and go up and over there. There we go. We've done, those are our altitude changes, and that's where we stop by using these two tiles. Yay! Now, for pink, we start here and go up to here in that direction. And then we're going to start here and just go up one forward. Very simple stuff. Probably wouldn't do this for real. All right. And then that's the end of our tiles, our tile fun. Then we decide if anybody has a target lock. Now to do that, take your card and orient it and take a look. You'll notice that I am actually, if you oriented the card and face it right there, I can do a target lock here for 2. So 2 dice. So I'm able to hit for 2 dice because of the way that this works. So there is some orientation involved, so this isn't. And then for this, guess what? Right here, would you be shocked to know that it actually is the one place that this misses for countermeasures? If he had been anywhere else, he would have gotten a -1, which would have been 1 die, and the altitude difference would have made it 0 dice. Instead, he gets his full 2 dice to be able to roll to try to get a target lock. And that's great, except for one thing. Altitude-wise, he's lower altitude, so he immediately drops 1. So we're down to 1 dice. 1 dice. And look at that, it's a hit. So that ends the round. 5 points goes to blue, and that is it. That's the end of it. Now, normally you want to go on a little farther than that. You want to try and do a better job of, tactically moving your F-14 Tomcat a little better than I did. Mine was weak. But that's the general gist of the game. With that done, you then move back over to play more volleyball. Everything just kind of resets. Back over to play volleyball. Whoever wins gets the advantage. You decide what you want to do here to attack or defend. You know, if for example, I had been able to move over here or fly right by, there would be points to be able to get, you know, and it's up to 12. So ultimately, you're going to play at least 2 rounds of this. It's possible to win in 2 rounds. Generally speaking, if you're always the attacker, you're going to need at least 3 rounds. So that's it. That's the entire bulk of Top Gun. Let's take a look at my thoughts now and see what I think. How's that for redundant? Okay, well, let's get into my final thoughts on Top Gun strategy game. First off, let's go over the pros this time. I'll do pros, cons, and then the summary. This game really exudes the spirit of the Top Gun era. It's got that Laserdisc, Kenny Loggins, pink parachute pants era kind of vibe to it from the time you look at the box to the time you open the box to what you look at inside the box. It's got this neon Miami Vice color scheme. It's perfect for nostalgic triggering. It's you got your F-14 silhouettes, your volleyball poses, and all of that is done just absolutely knocks it out of the park for the thematic theme, artistically and just component wise. The volleyball game is it's a surprise hit. It is the sleeper hit inside the box. It actually feels like a marquee portion of the game rather than just the opening act. It's like having Journey open for Skid Row. Like, they're both decent. Opinion. Long hair. It could have been a microgame on its own, really. I actually think it's clever enough that you could easily have made it a little microgame like Volleyball City and stuff. The dogfighting portion is strategic, but not overwhelmingly so. It's not Wings of War, or it's not going to, fool anyone into thinking it's a tabletop game or miniatures thing. There's enough maneuvering, and the feeding of advantage from the volleyball game into the strategic portion of the game is pronounced. Maybe a bit too pronounced, I don't know. It still gives a chance for the disadvantaged, though, to be able to turn the tide with clever play and wind up scoring more points than the aggressor. So it does have that sort of like balance mechanism in it. It's and the strategy part is, while of itself is decent, it's really also, as you may have expected, a game of outwitting your opponent. Like, I think he's going to go down and go this way, that way, stuff. The fact that you don't exhaust the tiles you use means you're not going, okay, well, he's used these 6 tiles, so I know the only ones he has left are this move and that move. No, none of that. Even though the weapons cards exhaust and have to be like explicitly returned, you always have available all of the things in your arsenal for the tiles that help you maneuver your ship. Albeit usually at the cost of the more dramatic the move, the lower you go in altitude. Makes sense. So those are the positives. The cons, the components are serviceable. I mean, thematically they're great. They evoke the theme of volleyball. They evoke the theme of dogfighting. They're not low budget. They're just not astounding. I mean, it fits the price point. The price point was around $20, which I think is, perfect for this. The game itself is very stealthy. This is like F-17A, is it? There's little to no information about it, not from the designer or publisher. There's almost nothing about it. There's no website presence. Like, if you go to the website in the manual, there's nothing on that website that has anything to do with Top Gun. Maybe it's because they're just rolling it out. I don't know, but it's a little weird anyway. Usually there's some sort of like, hey, check this out, because it's Top Gun. It's a strategy game, and it doesn't suck. The other thing is, it's weird, is that there's very, very few actual references to Top Gun the movie. You have the 4 names of the 4 top guys, Mav, Goose, Slider, Iceman. But you don't get, everything is pretty abstracted away into sort of the 80s vibe, not necessarily a specific Top Gun vibe. There's no movie, very specific movie references or movie imagery at all, which doesn't take away from it. It's just a little interesting that they, it's almost like they avoided too much of a connection. It's very, very different. But they do an excellent job with silhouettes, like poses, volleyball poses that have silhouettes, generic names for other things, etc. It's still clearly inspired by Top Gun. Like, there will be no ambiguity and no mistaking that. The dogfighting portion, I would say, I mean, I have zero complaints about the volleyball portion at all. Like, I'm like, wow, this is a surprise. I think that's been the general reaction anyway. The dogfighting portion is, despite being simpler, there is some things that are a little bit cumbersome. Moving up and down the altitude is clever, but might be a little bit over clever. It looks cinematically cool when you're like going up there and down, but it breaks the flow when you're changing altitude and you're like, you know, if you've got like stubby hands and you're like trying to like, okay, I move this, you know, again, you only need to adjust for every move, you don't need to adjust altitude. You can just finish your move and then decide altitude because everything resolves at the end of everyone's move simultaneously. But I'm thinking about finding a way to have sort of maybe a class that I can just move it up or down, as opposed to having to pop it out and pop it into these clear plastic sort of altitude things. Again, a small detail, but when you're doing this over and over, especially because the base of these airplanes is very light, and so they tend to get like knocked and moved, and orientation is very important, so you're like, you can't just hold down, pull it out, and put the thing in. You have to like, I end up like picking it up, trying to remember the orientation, moving the altitude, and maybe I should, I could do this first, but either way, I think there's a better way to do it, and I'm going to experiment with it, because I think that would help a lot with the flow of the game. Like, I moved here, I moved there, I went up and down, and just help make it more smooth. The deluxe version! Once again, a tiny detail. The biggest thing, though, is the disparity of the game modes. You go from, you go from this zen feeling of this ping pong volleyball match that's just going on and like smooth flow, and then you switch entire mindsets to an entirely different degree where you're doing spatial changing, robo rally programming, orientating your dogfight, which makes total sense in that picture of the game, but you are making a big leap. And I found that when I tried this with audiences, everybody loved the game overall, but this was the biggest thing that made people go, was that you either really like the volleyball game and put up with the strategy game, or the opposite. You're like, that's quaint, but let's get to the meaty game. I didn't find people who were like en masse going, this entire package just rocks. I mean, either you love the volleyball and you're like, yeah, like I said, love the volleyball, put up with the strategy game, or you put up with the volleyball and love the strategy game. Didn't find many people overlapping it with equal measures of pleasure. Nobody loved the entire game aspect atomically, like this whole package. In some ways, I almost wish for 3 parts. I almost wish that you had the volleyball, and that gave you an advantage going to this fog of love game style of thing to go over the romance, the great balls of emotional fire part, and then go into this final sort of like strategy thing and stuff. I would have actually preferred that flow-wise to what there was in the game, just for synergy reasons, and not the looping repeat. Because you play volleyball, you go into a strategy game, then you loop around, you play volleyball again, you go into the strategy game, you loop around. You have to play at least 2 rounds of this. I mean, if you've got a defensive juggernaut who can get 6 points every turn, then you're done in 2 rounds. Otherwise, you're going to do this 3 times. And I almost feel like I wish it had just one playthrough. I felt like that would have maybe done better for overall in general for people, at least the people that were playing it with me. To give a little bit more synergy, maybe something to kind of synergize the different game modes with a little less jarring dissimilarity. Because other games that do that sort of switching, like Hunt for the Ring, for example, is a game that does the same thing. Like, you play half the game, flip over the board, you play another half the game, but the rules are iterative to the previous portion. They add to it or take away from it. They don't go, you played cricket, and now you're going to play Call of Duty. It's in some ways, maybe it's like chess boxing. I mean, that's a case of very dissimilar play patterns. Maybe in that light, you're like, this is chess boxing. So if you don't like getting your crap kicked out of you in your face, then just play chess. But anyway, let's get on to my summary of thoughts, because I've waxed eloquent way too long. Top Gun is not going to break the sound barrier of awesomeness the way the movie did. But, I mean, it pays homage perfectly to the vibe I remember most from watching that movie way too often. I mean, it shows the zeal for the movie has aged quite nicely, even dare I say better than some of its cast even. It also brings back a compulsion to recite all the memorable lines from the movie. I mean, it's big on initial splash, despite being a generally average play experience overall after you're done with, after the buzz has worn off. I can say without reservation that it is the best volleyball board game simulation ever created. Hyperbola for the win. As for dogfighting, it's fine. It's not Red Storm or War Over Europe or Wings of War, but it does a representative job of the movie. And this is the kind of game that I might not necessarily play often once the buzz wore off, but its value will be in the fact that it exists and I own it. Because I know if I have that box on the shelf and people come by, the first thing it's going to be like, whoa, they made a game out of Top Gun? That's cool. Like, yeah, you want to give it a try? Sure. And even if it's just like a 1 or 2 shot thing, it's still Top Gun. It's still decent. It's memorabilia city. And for that, $20 well spent. So even if it didn't quite take my breath away, I do expect demand to take off, so don't put on the brakes or it'll fly right by. In the meantime, I'll be logging some plays of it with the boys, because I feel the need